What if the scariest stories weren't made up, but actually happened? These are 75 real-life horror stories, unsolved mysteries, eerie encounters, and chilling disappearances, all told in a calm voice to help you drift off. But be warned, some stories stay with you, even after the lights go out. 1. The Man in the Backseat. It was late, nearly midnight, when Andrea finished her shift at a small-town diner in rural Montana. The air was crisp, the roads were empty, and all she could hear was the steady hum of her car heater as she drove home. Then, in the rearview mirror, she noticed a truck following her. At first, she thought little of it. But it didn't pass. Instead, it stayed close, flashing its high beams. Once. Then again. Then continuously. Her heartbeat quickened. Was the driver aggressive? Drunk? She pulled onto a side road, hoping the truck would pass. But it followed, closer than ever. Every time she accelerated, it did too. She finally stopped at a gas station and bolted inside. The truck driver jumped out and shouted, "There's someone in your backseat." Police arrived within minutes. Hidden under a blanket in the backseat of her car was a man with a knife. An escaped mental patient. He had slipped into her unlocked car while she was at work, crouched silently, waiting for the right moment. The truck driver had noticed a shadow rise and fall in the backseat each time his headlights hit Andrea's car. She'd been driving with death inches from her neck. What unsettles most isn't the rescue, it's the idea that for miles, in the quiet safety of her vehicle, she wasn't alone. Sometimes, the real horror doesn't come with a scream. It comes silently, from the dark space just behind you. 2. The Watcher House Letters. In 2014, Derek and Maria Broadus were living a dream. They had just bought their perfect family home in Westfield, New Jersey, an elegant Dutch colonial on 657 Boulevard. But before they could even move in, the letters began arriving. Typed in clunky block letters, the first one was unnerving. "My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, my father in the 1960s. It is now my time." It was signed, The Watcher. The writer claimed to be the guardian of the home, obsessed with its walls, secrets, and the young blood the Broaduses were bringing. More letters followed, each more disturbing. The Watcher knew their kids' names, their routines, the layout of the house. He asked if they'd filled the basement with laughter yet. He couldn't hear them from down there. Police investigated. The Broaduses hired private detectives, even former FBI profilers. No one could trace the letters. There was no DNA match, no fingerprints, and no surveillance footage. Every theory led to a dead end. The family never moved in. They sold the house years later at a loss. The story captured national attention, and still, the identity of the Watcher remains unknown. It's one thing to be watched. It's another to be stalked by someone who believes it's their sacred duty to observe you, generation after generation. The true horror here isn't blood or violence. It's the deep-rooted, unseen presence that watches from the shadows. The kind that doesn't want to hurt you, just to know you, completely. 3. Eliza Lamb's elevator death. The Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles has long been a magnet for mystery, but the 2013 case of Eliza Lamb took it to a chilling new level. Eliza was a 21-year-old student from Vancouver traveling solo. She checked into the Cecil in late January. Days later, she vanished. The last known footage of her? A haunting surveillance video from the hotel's elevator. In it, she steps in, presses multiple buttons, peeks outside the doors, and hides in the corner, acting erratically, as if being followed. Her arms move strangely, as though communicating with something unseen. Then she vanishes from view. 19 days later, guests complained of low water pressure and a strange taste. Maintenance staff investigated the rooftop water tanks, and found Eliza's body floating inside. Naked. Her clothes were nearby. The tanks were locked, requiring a ladder and significant strength to open. The autopsy ruled it an accidental drowning, though no drugs or alcohol were found. But questions remain. How did she access the rooftop? Why was the elevator acting strangely? Who, or what, was she hiding from? Some blame her mental health struggles. Others suspect foul play. And then there are those who whisper about the hotel's cursed history. The Cecil had been home to serial killers, suicides, and decades of dark energy. Whether Eliza met a tragic accident or something more sinister, one truth lingers. Her final moments remain locked in that eerie elevator, a silent scream caught on tape, and a mystery that refuses to rest. 4. Footprints in the snow, but no exit. It was a snowy morning in February 1945 in Devon, England, when residents awoke to a strange sight, a line of footprints stretching for miles across the countryside. What made them bizarre wasn't just their length, over 100 miles, but their shape. The prints were cloven, almost hoof-like, and spaced in such a way that no known animal or human could have made them. Even more disturbing was how they crossed over houses, rivers, haystacks, and even walls, without interruption. The tracks became known as the Devil's Footprints. They passed through enclosed gardens, over rooftops, and straight through narrow drainpipes too small for anything to fit. Some claimed they ended at impossible places, like high walls or in the middle of open fields with no sign of return. Locals were terrified. Churches held emergency prayer services. Rumors spread, had Satan himself walked through Devon that night? Some believed it was an elaborate prank, others suggested escaped kangaroos from a private menagerie. But no explanation ever fully satisfied the mystery. The footprints were seen by hundreds and even photographed, yet no tracks of entry or exit were ever found. Just one long, uninterrupted path that vanished as suddenly as it began. What haunted people most wasn't just the prints, it was the logic-defying nature of them. Something unknown had traveled through their world, leaving its mark, and disappearing without a trace. Not a howl, not a scream. Just silence, and a trail of impossible steps. 5. The Craigslist Intruder. In 2009, Catherine, a single mother living in Oregon, decided to move across town. To help with the transition, she posted an ad on Craigslist, offering some items for free pickup: an old dresser, a microwave, some kids' toys. Simple, right? Only hours later, things went wrong. Strangers began arriving at her house before the scheduled time. One man tried to open the front door. Another walked into her garage uninvited. She told them the items weren't available yet, but they insisted, claiming the Craigslist post said it was first come, first served. Alarmed, Catherine checked the listing. What she found wasn't hers. Someone had copied her original ad, changed the wording, and reposted it, inviting anyone to take whatever they wanted from her home. That same afternoon, while she was picking up her son from school, the real horror unfolded. When she returned, her home had been looted. Appliances, tools, heirlooms, all gone. The locks had been broken. Someone had used her own kindness as bait. Police later discovered the fake ad had come from a nearby IP address, but the person was never found. Catherine had been targeted. Someone had studied her, known when she'd be away. The most chilling part? The violation wasn't just physical. It was psychological. Her trust had been used against her. Her safety turned into a trap. A warning that sometimes horror doesn't knock, it posts an ad and waits. 6. Disappearance of Brandon Swanson. In the early morning hours of May 14, 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson was driving home to Marshall, Minnesota, after a college party. Just after midnight, his car veered into a ditch on a rural gravel road. He was uninjured and called his parents for help. Brandon sounded calm. He told them he'd walk toward nearby lights, which he believed was a town. He remained on the phone with his father for 47 minutes. At one point, he abruptly said, "Oh, sure," and the line went silent. When police arrived, they found his car, but not Brandon. Despite massive searches involving dogs, helicopters, and volunteers, no trace of him was ever found. His phone records showed he had walked nearly 20 miles in the opposite direction of where he thought he was. There were no signs of a struggle. No clues. Just silence and open fields. Some speculate he fell into a nearby river, though no body was ever recovered. Others believe he was abducted or met someone by chance. His last words and sudden silence haunt investigators and his family to this day. What makes Brandon's case especially eerie is how it unfolded in real time. His father listened helplessly as his son vanished into the dark. 1 minute, a normal conversation. The next, nothing. No goodbye. No scream. Just a breath, a pause, and a disappearance. His story is a reminder, not all vanishings happen in mystery novels. Some happen with a cell phone in hand, mid-sentence, under a starless sky. 7. Robert the Doll. In a Key West museum sits an old, faded doll named Robert. But this isn't just any doll. He's believed to be cursed. Robert was given to a boy named Robert Eugene Otto in the early 1900s by a Bahamian servant who reportedly practiced voodoo. Almost immediately, strange things began happening in the Otto household. The boy would have long, whispered conversations with the doll. Neighbors reported seeing Robert move on his own. Sometimes, people heard giggling when no one was around. As the boy grew older, his obsession with the doll remained. He kept Robert close, even giving him his own chair at the dinner table. But soon, things took a darker turn. Eugene's parents would find his room in disarray, furniture overturned. When asked, Eugene always said the same thing: Robert did it. After Eugene's death, the doll remained in the house. The next owners quickly reported that Robert moved rooms on his own. They'd hear footsteps in the attic, and sometimes see his expression change. One visitor claimed the doll smiled at her, and days later, she was in a car crash. Today, Robert resides in a glass case at the Fort East Motello Museum. Staff say if you want to take his photo, you must ask politely. Those who disrespect him are said to suffer misfortune. Letters of apology arrive at the museum every month. Whether cursed or not, Robert has an undeniable presence. One that watches silently. And sometimes, answers. 8. The Black Monk of Pontefract. At 30 East Drive in Pontefract, England, lies what many believe is the most violently haunted house in Britain. The haunting began in 1966 when the Pritchard family moved in. It started with small things, green foam oozing from taps, lights flickering, but it quickly escalated. Objects flew across the room. Heavy furniture was overturned. A grandfather clock shattered without being touched. Cold gusts of wind would blast through closed rooms. But the most terrifying moments centered around 15-year-old Diane, who was frequently dragged upstairs by invisible hands and slapped across the face, leaving red marks. The family came to believe the house was haunted by the spirit of a 16th-century monk who had been executed nearby. Sightings of a dark-robed figure with no face became common. He moved with unnatural speed and seemed to target the family's moments of peace, appearing just when they began to relax. Exorcisms failed. Priests were chased out. Even skeptics left terrified. Despite the attacks, the family remained in the house for several years before fleeing. It remained empty for decades, yet passers-by still reported strange sounds and glimpses of a black figure in the windows. Investigators who visit today often leave shaken. Electronics malfunction. Temperatures drop. Shadows linger in corners. Whether poltergeist or something darker, the Black Monk has never truly left. He waits, silent and cloaked, bound not to a person, but to the very walls themselves. 9. The Ghost Who Left Notes. In the mid-1990s, a quiet English family moved into a modest cottage in Staffordshire. They expected peace. What they got was a haunting, one that communicated. It started with misplaced items, keys gone, glasses in the freezer, chairs moved. Then came the noises, gentle knocking, whispers through the vents. But the strangest part? The notes. One day, the mother found a piece of torn paper on the kitchen counter. In faint, spidery writing, it said, "Don't leave me alone." She asked her children. Her husband. No one claimed it. She dismissed it as a prank, until more notes began appearing. They were always handwritten. Always pleading. "It's cold here. Why can't you see me? I miss the light. Sometimes they were tucked into drawers, slipped under pillows, or found inside closed books. The family set up cameras. They caught nothing. Paranormal investigators were brought in but couldn't explain it. There were no signs of forced entry. The handwriting didn't match anyone in the house. Some notes even appeared inside locked cabinets. One night, after a particularly cold spell, a final note appeared: "Thank you for remembering me." The house went silent after that. No more noises. No more disturbances. Years later, during renovations, workers found a sealed crawlspace beneath the floorboards. Inside were old clothes, a locket, and a diary belonging to a young girl who had died in the home over a century earlier. Some haunting scream. This one wrote, "And in her quiet way, she was never really gone, just waiting to be seen." 10. The stranger under the bed. In 2010, a woman living in Manhattan returned home after a long day and collapsed onto her bed. Something felt off, but she couldn't quite place it. The apartment seemed fine. No sign of a break-in. Just a strange smell she couldn't identify. She assumed it was her garbage and ignored it. That night, she tossed and turned, convinced she heard faint breathing. The next day, she did a more thorough check. Closet, clear. Bathroom, clear. But when she knelt to retrieve a dropped earring, she noticed something odd. The bed's skirt shifted ever so slightly, and she caught sight of a pale hand. She froze. Heart racing, she grabbed her phone and fled the apartment, calling police from the hallway. When officers arrived and looked beneath the bed, they found a man curled up tightly, holding a kitchen knife. He was filthy, gaunt, and completely silent. He'd been living under her bed for days, possibly longer, coming out only when she was away. There had been no signs of forced entry. Investigators believe he slipped in through the fire escape one day while she was at work and never left. He survived on scraps from her trash, using her shower, and hiding at the sound of the door. The smell she noticed? It was him. The horror wasn't just in the hiding, it was in the intimacy. He knew her routines, her rhythms, her silence, and she had slept just inches above a stranger who never meant to leave. 11. The cabin with no exit tracks. A group of friends decided to spend a winter weekend in a remote cabin in northern Ontario. The area was known for deep snow and utter stillness. It was the perfect escape. No cell service, no neighbors, just silence and nature. They arrived late Friday night, built a fire, and settled in. The snow had already covered their tracks by morning, making the world look untouched. But when one of them stepped outside to get more firewood, he noticed something strange: fresh footprints leading from the woods directly to the front door. The prints were large, barefoot, human. No one had arrived after them. They checked the area, no signs of anyone nearby. Stranger still, the tracks stopped at the front steps. There were no return tracks, no trail leading away. Just one clear path, to them. They spent the day unnerved but trying to dismiss it. Maybe it was a prank? A lost hiker? But that night, things escalated. Around 2 a.m., they heard a soft knock on the door. No one opened it. No one spoke. The knock came again. Then again. Always soft. Always patient. When morning came, they checked outside. More footprints, this time circling the cabin. Still no exit trail. They packed up and left immediately. A later investigation found nothing. But the photos they took of the prints? Gone from their phones. To this day, they don't know who or what visited. Only that something came and never seemed to leave. 12. The Dybbuk Box. In 2001, an antique wine cabinet appeared at an estate sale in Oregon. A young man named Kevin Mannies bought it as a gift for his mother. Inside were strange items: 2 locks of hair, a small statue, a dried rosebud, a goblet, and a candle holder. Kevin was told never to open it. But curiosity won. Soon after, strange things began to happen. Kevin's mother suffered a stroke the very day he gave her the box. Lights flickered in his home. He had terrifying nightmares of a demonic figure. Everyone who came into contact with the box reported anxiety, illness, or hallucinations. Kevin learned the box came from a Holocaust survivor who had used it to trap a malevolent spirit, a dybbuk, from Jewish folklore. A dybbuk is said to be a restless, vengeful entity that can attach itself to individuals and objects, spreading misfortune. Kevin tried to sell the box. Each new owner experienced worse symptoms: hair falling out, insects invading their homes, unshakable dread. One man even claimed the box made him smell jasmine and cat urine at the same time. Eventually, the box was donated to a museum run by paranormal investigator Zach Bagans, where it remains locked in a protective case. Even now, visitors claim to feel ill or overwhelmed in its presence. Whether cursed or psychological, the dybbuk box leaves a mark. Not by striking, but by slowly unraveling the lives of those who dare to open it, and those who simply come too close. 13. The House That Bled. In 1987, Minnie Winston, a 77-year-old woman in Atlanta, Georgia, stepped out of her bath to find something horrifying: blood oozing from the bathroom walls. Not red paint. Not rust. Blood. At first, she thought she was injured. But she wasn't. Her husband, sleeping in the next room, was also unharmed. But the blood was spreading, down the hallway, across the kitchen floor, even seeping from the baseboards. It soaked the tiles, the carpet, and the stairs. In total, it appeared in over 6 separate locations in the house. Panicked, they called the police. Investigators arrived, expecting a prank or perhaps an injury gone unnoticed. But the blood tested as human. Type O. Neither Minnie nor her husband matched that blood type. And there were no signs of forced entry or violence. The case quickly made national headlines. Experts tested the house, checked for animal remains, even scanned for mold or bacteria that could cause a red fluid to leak. Nothing explained it. The house wasn't built on a burial site. No one had died there. Eventually, the police closed the case as unexplained. The bleeding never returned. The Winstons lived in the home peacefully until their deaths. To this day, the story is unsolved. Some believe it was a hoax, but no motive was ever found. Others think it was supernatural, a wound opened by something unseen. A house that bled, once, and then healed, like something alive. Or something hiding just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to seep through again. 14. The Silent Screamer in the Basement. In 2003, a couple moved into a charming colonial home in upstate New York. It had charm, character, and a basement with a heavy, iron door. The previous owners never used it, and the realtor had no information. Curious, the new owners pried it open. The basement was cold, damp, covered in cobwebs. But what unsettled them most was how sound seemed to vanish down there. No echo, no creaks, just silence. Days after opening it, strange events began. At night, they'd hear movement below, furniture shifting, low thumps. But whenever they investigated, the basement was empty. One night, their dog refused to go near the stairs, whining and cowering. Then came the screams. Not loud, not shrill, but whisper-thin, as if someone were screaming at a distance, with no air. The woman described it as a sound you feel, not hear. Like pressure in your skull. They installed audio recorders. One clip captured a faint, rasping moan. Another caught what sounded like a child crying, then laughing. But each time they tried to confront it, rituals, priests, even sealing the door, things got worse. Appliances failed. Dreams turned violent. The screams became more frequent. They finally moved out. The next tenant, a single man, lasted just 2 months. He reported waking up at the bottom of the basement stairs, with no memory of walking there. The silent screamer never shouted. It simply waited, just below the threshold of sound. Not loud enough to terrify you. Just enough to never let you sleep again. 15. The Phone Number That Kills People. In the early 2000s, a strange rumor circulated in Eastern Europe about a phone number, +3598888888888. It was said that anyone who owned it would die shortly after. It sounds like a movie plot. But 3 successive owners of the number all died under mysterious, and often violent, circumstances. The first, Vladimir Grashnov, was a successful Bulgarian businessman who died of cancer. Some say the illness came rapidly, without warning. The second, Konstantin Dimitrov, a mafia boss, was gunned down while on a trip to the Netherlands. The third owner, also linked to criminal activity, was shot and killed in broad daylight. Following the deaths, the phone number was suspended by the mobile company. Anyone who tried to call it heard a recorded message, outside network coverage. It hasn't been reactivated since. Speculation swirled. Was it cursed? Some believed the number was being tracked by intelligence agencies and marked its users for death. Others claimed it had ties to black market dealings, and owning it was a death sentence from the underworld. But what if none of that explains it? What if the number itself, somehow, carries a weight? A digital hex. A pattern of digits that the universe reacts to, like a cosmic frequency best left alone. Urban legend? Maybe. But no one has dared take ownership of that number again. And in a world where numbers connect us all, maybe some combinations were never meant to exist. 16. The disappearance of Maura Murray. On February 9, 2004, Maura Murray, a 21-year-old nursing student, emailed her professors to say she'd be taking time off due to a family emergency. But there was no emergency. She packed her belongings, withdrew money from an ATM, and headed north toward the White Mountains of New Hampshire. That evening, her car was found crashed on a rural road in Woodsville. A passing bus driver stopped and offered help. Maura declined, saying she'd already called roadside assistance. But records show no such call was made. By the time police arrived minutes later, Maura was gone. There were no footprints in the snow leading away from the scene. Her belongings, including her wallet and phone, were missing. Searches with dogs, helicopters, and volunteers turned up nothing. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Over the years, theories piled up. Some say she faked her disappearance to start a new life. Others believe she met with foul play, possibly abducted by someone who happened upon her after the crash. No solid evidence supports either theory. What chills people is how complete the vanishing was. A young woman, in the prime of her life, simply erased. No trace. No closure. No goodbye. Maura's last known act was to head into the unknown, alone, and then vanish just as night fell. The road remains quiet. The case remains open. And every winter, as snow blankets the hills again, people still ask, where did Maura go? 17. Voices over the baby monitor. In 2011, a young couple in Chicago bought a state-of-the-art baby monitor with video and sound. Their newborn slept in the nursery next door, and the monitor let them rest easy, until the night they heard a voice that wasn't theirs. At 2:12 a.m., the father was woken by static, then a whisper. At first, he thought it was interference. But the voice grew clearer. It was male. Calm. And it was saying the baby's name. Terrified, he ran into the nursery. The baby was asleep, unharmed. The window was locked. No one was inside. But the voice continued to whisper through the monitor, even after he unplugged and reset it. The couple contacted the manufacturer. Technically, someone could hack into the system, but the process would require extreme proximity and technical skill. They changed Wi-Fi passwords, switched to a new monitor, even installed security cameras. But the voices didn't stop. They would whisper lullabies, ask questions, occasionally laugh. Sometimes they said the parents' names, or mentioned things only someone inside the house could know. One night, the voice simply said, "I'm closer than you think." Eventually, they stopped using the monitor altogether. The baby slept in their room. They moved months later. Whether it was a stalker, a hacker, or something else, no one was ever caught. The idea of someone watching is unsettling. But the idea of someone speaking, quietly, gently, persistently, to your child, while you sleep a room away, that's horror you don't forget. 18. The vanishing tent in Joshua Tree. In 2010, hikers exploring a remote area of Joshua Tree National Park came across a chilling sight, a single yellow tent, zipped shut, standing in the middle of nowhere. Inside, they found supplies, a sleeping bag, a backpack, and a half-finished journal. But no sign of the person who'd pitched it. The tent had clearly been there a while. Everything was sun-bleached and coated in desert dust. Rangers were alerted, and a search began. But it quickly became clear there were no nearby footprints. No tire tracks. No trail leading in or out. It was as if the tent had dropped from the sky. The journal entries were vague but unsettling. They spoke of hearing voices at night, of shadows that moved where they shouldn't, and of a presence circling the tent. The last entry simply read, "It's watching me. I'm not alone." Despite extensive searches using drones, dogs, and helicopters, no trace of the camper was ever found. No missing person matched the gear or journal. No family came forward. Some speculate it was a hiker who lost their mind in the heat and wandered off. Others believe it was someone trying to escape something, or someone. The most bizarre theories say the tent marked a portal or an experiment gone wrong. The tent was eventually removed. But for years, rangers spoke of how birds avoided that area, of compasses that spun strangely nearby, and of how, even in daylight, the air around that site felt wrong. 19. The boy in the box. In February 1957, the body of a young boy, bruised, malnourished, and wrapped in a plaid blanket, was found stuffed in a cardboard box in a wooded area of Philadelphia. He was estimated to be between 3 and 7 years old. His hair had been crudely cut, possibly after death. There were no identifying marks, no missing persons reports that matched, and no one ever came forward. Dubbed the boy in the box, his case became one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Detectives combed through orphanages, hospitals, and door-to-door inquiries, but every lead ended in silence. Even now, decades later, his identity remains unknown. Over the years, theories swirled. Some believed he was the illegitimate child of a prominent family. Others suspected he was sold or kidnapped and died from abuse. In the early 2000s, a woman came forward with a bizarre tale involving her mother keeping the boy in a basement before killing him, but nothing was confirmed. What chills people most is the loneliness of it all. A nameless child, abandoned like garbage. No funeral. No name. Just a cardboard box in the woods and a mystery that refuses to die. In 2022, a potential breakthrough with DNA testing offered hope. Authorities released an age-progressed portrait and reopened the investigation. Yet the identity still eludes them. The boy in the box is more than just a cold case. He's a symbol of voiceless tragedy. Someone's child. Forgotten by the world. And waiting, even now, to be named. 20. The Goat Man of Maryland. In the forests near Beltsville, Maryland, legends speak of a creature that's half man, half goat. The Goat Man. Described as over 6 feet tall, with the head and legs of a goat and the torso of a man, it's been blamed for animal mutilations, sudden disappearances, and chilling cries that echo through the trees. The most popular version of the legend says the Goat Man was once a scientist working at the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center. After an experiment involving goats went horribly wrong, he mutated, or went mad, and disappeared into the woods, where he's hunted ever since. Teens visiting local lovers' lanes in the 1970s began reporting sightings. Slashed tires. Clawed car doors. Blooded remains of dogs. One couple claimed the Goat Man leapt onto their car as they tried to flee. Skeptics say it's just urban myth, a tool to keep kids from sneaking out at night. But the stories persist. Sightings still pop up in Reddit threads and local news reports. The tension in the woods is real. Hikers talk of sudden silences, of feeling watched, of hoofprints in places no animal should be. Whether monster, misidentification, or metaphor, the goat man has burrowed into Maryland folklore. He's become part of a shared fear, a local legend with just enough truth to make you think twice before walking alone in the woods. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't what you see, but what might be just behind the trees. 21. The hidden room in the apartment. When a young woman moved into her New York City apartment in 2013, she noticed a strange draft in the bathroom. Curious, she examined the mirror and discovered it was hiding a hole in the wall. Behind that hole was a dark, empty void. A hidden room. Naturally, she documented the exploration. Her friends joined her as she climbed through the hole, finding themselves in a forgotten apartment hidden between walls. Trash and abandoned furniture filled the space, as though someone had once lived there and left in a hurry. There were water bottles, bags, a half-eaten apple, a chair facing the hole. Suddenly, it didn't feel like an architectural mistake. It felt like a secret kept too well. The discovery went viral on TikTok, unsettling millions. Why was it never sealed off? Why was there only a flimsy panel separating it from her bathroom? Who had been staying there, and were they watching her? Building management offered no clear answers. Just apologies. But the woman couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been listening. Or worse, waiting. Hidden spaces aren't uncommon in old buildings. But this one wasn't filled with dust or cobwebs. It was lived in. Recently. The thought that a complete stranger could have been mere inches away, separated only by a mirror, is horrifying. In a world of surveillance and security, there's something deeply unsettling about the idea that the real danger might be coming from inside the walls. Some holes are better left unopened. 22. The Tamamshud case. On December 1, 1948, a well-dressed man was found dead on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia. He had no identification, and all the tags on his clothing had been removed. In his pocket, investigators found a tightly rolled scrap of paper with two Persian words, Tamamshud. Translated, it means ended or finished. This was just the beginning of what would become one of the most perplexing mysteries in forensic history. An autopsy revealed no signs of violence, but also no clear cause of death. Poison was suspected, though none was found in his system. A secret pocket in the man's pants later revealed a copy of a rare book, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, that matched the torn paper. Within that book was a code, handwritten, that has never been deciphered. Even stranger, a local nurse connected to the case refused to speak about her involvement, and when shown the dead man's face, she nearly fainted. She claimed not to know him. The case remains unsolved. Many theories have been proposed: espionage, a secret lover, suicide, but none provide a complete picture. The man has never been conclusively identified, despite multiple facial reconstructions and international searches. The phrase Tamamshud still haunts investigators and amateur sleuths alike. Who was he? Why did he die? And what secrets died with him on that beach? Sometimes, the scariest stories aren't violent. They are quiet, coded, and endlessly unanswered. 23. The Woman with No Eyes. In 2006, a man checked into a small roadside motel in rural Arizona. Tired from the road, he was drifting off when he heard the soft shuffle of footsteps outside his room. He assumed it was another guest. But the footsteps stopped directly in front of his door and stayed there. After a minute, he looked through the peephole. Standing there was a woman in a hospital gown, barefoot, swaying slightly. Her hair was stringy and unkempt, and her face was wrong. Where her eyes should have been were two gaping, black voids. Frozen in shock, the man didn't move. The woman didn't knock, didn't speak. She just stood there, as if she knew he was watching. Eventually, she turned and shuffled away. He reported the incident to the front desk, but they found no trace of her. No security footage. No other guests had seen her. And no local hospitals had a patient matching that description. The man left first thing in the morning. Since then, similar stories have appeared online, always describing the same woman. Same gown. Same eyeless face. She appears at night. She doesn't speak. She just stands and waits. Skeptics chalk it up to sleep paralysis or hallucinations. But the consistency of the details, the gown, the posture, the absence of eyes, gives many pause. Who, or what, is the woman with no eyes? There's something primal about our fear of being watched. And nothing watches harder than something that shouldn't be able to. 24. The Enfield Poltergeist. In 1977, the quiet suburb of Enfield, North London, became the center of one of the most famous poltergeist cases in history. It began when single mother Peggy Hodgson called police to report furniture moving on its own and knocking sounds from inside the walls of her modest council house. But this was no simple haunting. The activity escalated quickly. Drawers opened by themselves, toys flew across rooms, and disembodied voices echoed through the house. Most disturbing of all were the events surrounding her 11-year-old daughter, Janet. Janet was reportedly possessed, levitating in front of witnesses, speaking in a deep, growling male voice, and being flung across the room by unseen forces. Her voice, researchers said, seemed to come from her throat while her mouth stayed still. The case was investigated by the Society for Psychical Research and documented by journalists and paranormal investigators. Photos were taken, audio recorded. Skeptics claimed the children faked it all for attention, but others who witnessed the events firsthand were convinced it was real. Even the police were left shaken after seeing a chair move across the room without anyone touching it. The Enfield case inspired books, documentaries, and even Hollywood films, including The Conjuring 2. Whether it was a hoax or a true haunting, something disturbed that house deeply. And Janet, even as an adult, admitted some events were real and some were not. But she never said which. Sometimes, belief itself becomes the haunting. What's more terrifying than not knowing if evil is real or just imagined? 25. The sleep paralysis entity with the hat. Across cultures and continents, people suffering from sleep paralysis report a disturbingly similar figure, a shadowy man wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Known simply as the Hat Man, this entity appears at the edge of the bed, looming silently, radiating dread. Unlike dreams, these experiences occur while a person is technically awake but unable to move. Victims often describe a crushing pressure on their chest, an overwhelming sense of evil, and an intense fear that defies logic. The Hat Man doesn't speak. He doesn't act. He just watches. Some say he leans closer. Some claim he slides toward them like smoke. But always, he watches. What's eerie is the consistency. Thousands of people from different backgrounds and countries, with no connection to each other, all describing the same figure. Long coat. White hat. Empty face. Skeptics argue that it's a trick of the brain, a hallucination born of fear during the paralysis state. But believers think he's more. A demon. A traveler. A watcher who feeds on helplessness. Some even say he visits before tragedy strikes. One woman in Texas reported seeing the Hat Man every night for 2 weeks. On the final night, he was standing over her father's bed. The next morning, her father died in his sleep. Real or imagined, the Hat Man is no longer just a nightmare. He's become part of modern folklore, passed on in whispers and forums. And tonight, if you wake and can't move, don't look too closely at the corner of your room. 26. The Crying Boy Painting. In the 1980s, a series of house fires swept through the UK. What was strange wasn't just the frequency, it was what remained. In multiple cases, the only thing left untouched by the flames was a painting, a mass-produced portrait of a tearful child known as the Crying Boy. Originally painted by Italian artist Giovanni Bragolin, the image became bizarrely popular in post-war Britain. Cheap prints hung in thousands of homes. But as fires broke out, firefighters began to notice a pattern. If a Crying Boy print was in the house, it survived the blaze. Unburned. Untouched. Soon, rumors spread that the painting was cursed. Some claimed the boy's eyes followed you. Others said the child had died in a fire himself, and his spirit lingered in the artwork, spreading grief. Tabloids fed the panic. People began burning the paintings en masse. Some who tried to dispose of them said the images reappeared, or that strange things happened in their homes afterward. Appliances malfunctioning, shadows moving, a constant sense of unease. Experts suggested the paintings were printed on fire-resistant materials, which explained their survival. But that didn't stop the fear. To this day, some refuse to hang replicas. Antique shops sometimes hide them in the back, unwilling to tempt fate. Can a painting hold a curse? Or do we project meaning onto coincidence, desperate for a reason behind random tragedy? Either way, if you ever see that painting, the sad eyes, the single tear, you may think twice before bringing it home. 27. The face at the glass door. It happened in a quiet suburb outside Seattle. A woman named Tara lived alone in a small house nestled among pine trees. One rainy night, while watching TV, she caught movement in her peripheral vision. Just a flicker at the sliding glass door behind her. She turned around. Nothing. But minutes later, it came again. This time, slower. She turned quickly, and for a split second, she saw it, a face. Pale. Unblinking. Pressed against the glass. She screamed, ran to the door, but by the time she got there, it was gone. No footprints. No sign of anyone. She locked every door and stayed awake all night, eyes darting toward that glass door. Morning brought calm, and she chalked it up to stress. Until it happened again. Night after night, the face returned. Always just a glimpse. Never long enough to be sure. One evening, she had the courage to snap a photo. When she looked at it later, her heart dropped. There was a face. But it wasn't human. The features were stretched. The eyes far too large. And where the mouth should have been, just a smooth patch of skin. She showed the photo to police. They dismissed it as glare or pareidolia, our brain's tendency to find patterns in randomness. But Tara moved out 2 weeks later. She never sold the house. Never went back. The house still stands. The glass door still faces the woods. And sometimes, hikers say they feel like someone's watching, just behind the glass. 28. The room with dozens of locks. When Michael, a property manager in Detroit, was inspecting an old, abandoned apartment building set for demolition, he stumbled across a unit that wasn't on the floor plan. It was wedged between two regular apartments, with a steel door covered in padlocks, dozens of them, all rusted and mismatched. The door frame was dented as if someone had tried to break it in, or out. He should have turned around. But curiosity got the better of him. He found bolt cutters in the maintenance shed and spent nearly an hour snipping through lock after lock. When the door finally creaked open, the air inside was thick and still. Dust hung in place like cobwebs. Inside, the room was barren. No furniture. No windows. Just a single wooden chair in the center, and deep scratches along the walls, as if someone had clawed at them. In the corner sat a tape recorder. Michael pressed play. A man's voice whispered, "Don't let it out." Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind him. Michael panicked, fighting with the latch. After several terrifying minutes, he escaped. The next day, demolition crews arrived. The room was gone. Not demolished, just not there. The unit didn't exist in blueprints. The hallway was seamless, no door, no marks. Michael left the job. No one else remembers the room. But Michael still has the recorder. He doesn't play it anymore. The last time he did, it had recorded new audio. Just breathing. Slow, steady breathing. And then, faintly, "I'm out." 29. Lars Mittink, the vanishing tourist. Lars Mittink was a 28-year-old German man on vacation with friends in Bulgaria in 2014. He was healthy, happy, and enjoying the beach. But after a minor dispute over football teams and a possible altercation, things changed. He complained of ear pain and saw a doctor, who diagnosed him with a ruptured eardrum and advised against flying. His friends flew home without him. Lars stayed behind alone. What happened next is still unexplained. Lars began behaving erratically. He texted his mother that he felt unsafe, that he was being followed, and asked her to cancel his credit cards. Security footage from his hotel shows him pacing, hiding in elevators, looking over his shoulder. The most chilling footage comes from the Varna airport. Lars enters the medical office calmly, but minutes later, he bolts out, leaving behind his luggage, passport, and phone. He sprints out of the airport and disappears into a nearby forest. He has never been seen again. No body was ever found. No further contact was made. His mother continues to search. Some believe Lars suffered a psychotic break. Others think he was drugged or targeted. Conspiracies range from organ trafficking to secret surveillance. But the footage is undeniable. A man in fear, running from something or someone. The most haunting disappearances are the ones that unfold in plain sight. Caught on camera. Mid-sentence. Midlife. And then, nothing. 30. The Annabelle Case File. Before Hollywood turned Annabelle into a demonic porcelain doll, the real story was more disturbing and more ordinary. In the 1970s, a young nursing student received a used Raggedy Ann doll as a gift. At first, it was just a cute decoration. But then, things started to change. The doll would move. Subtly at first, legs crossed differently, arms shifted. Then it began appearing in different rooms entirely. Notes appeared on parchment paper the students didn't own, scrawled with childlike handwriting, "Help us." One morning, they found the doll with red stains on its hands. A psychic told them the spirit of a little girl named Annabelle Higgins had latched onto the doll. Wanting to help, they invited her to stay. That's when it escalated. One friend claimed the doll attacked him, leaving claw marks across his chest. Another swore it tried to strangle him in his sleep. Finally, they contacted famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, who declared the doll was never inhabited by a child, but by something demonic, using innocence as bait. The Warrens took the doll and locked it in a glass case in their occult museum, warning it should never be touched. It remains there today, under constant blessing. Visitors are forbidden to provoke it. Some who mocked the doll reportedly met with accidents soon after. Whether it's a haunted doll or a mirror for our darkest fears, Annabelle's legend lives on, quiet, smiling, waiting behind the glass. 31. The Black-Eyed Children at the Door. It was late one evening in Abilene, Texas, when Brian Bethel parked his car near a movie theater to write a check. That's when two boys, around 10 or 12, approached his window. They were polite, well-dressed, and oddly calm. They asked for a ride home to get money for the movie. Something about them unsettled Brian. Maybe it was how confidently they spoke, or how they insisted he unlock the door. But then he saw their eyes, solid black, no whites, no irises. Just deep, endless voids. He refused. One boy grew angry, demanding entry. Brian sped away, heart pounding. When he looked in the mirror, the boys were gone. Since then, stories of black-eyed children have popped up across the world, always asking to be let in, always bringing a creeping sense of dread. They don't try to break in. They wait. Calm. Cold. Watching. And the moment you look into their eyes, it's as if your soul flinches. Some say they are vampires. Others believe they are aliens or demons wearing human skin. They speak without dated language and never seem to blink. And once you've encountered them, something in your life shifts, lights flicker, nightmares deepen, and the feeling of being watched never quite goes away. The rule is simple: never let them in. Don't speak to them. Don't pity them. And if you see two children standing alone in the dark, looking up at your window, turn off the lights and don't answer the knock. 32. The Silent Twins, June and Jennifer Gibbons. Born in 1963 in Wales, June and Jennifer Gibbons were identical twins who barely spoke to anyone else. From a young age, they developed their own language, unintelligible to others, and moved in eerie synchrony. Teachers, doctors, and even their parents were unnerved by their complete isolation from the world. The girls were inseparable but often volatile, sometimes violently fighting. As teenagers, they began writing dark stories and committing petty crimes, arson, theft, vandalism. Eventually, they were committed to Broadmoor Hospital, a high-security psychiatric facility. There, they stayed for over a decade. The most disturbing part? They had made a pact. One of them had to die for the other to be free. Jennifer reportedly told a nurse, "I'm going to die. We've decided." And not long after, she did, abruptly and without clear cause, from acute myocarditis, a sudden inflammation of the heart. After Jennifer's death, June began speaking normally, integrating into society, and even gave interviews. It was as if the silent spell had broken. Some believe they shared a psychic bond, so intense it became toxic. Others think their silence was a form of control, a rebellion against a world that didn't understand them. Their story isn't about ghosts or monsters, but something more haunting: the human mind, the power of connection, and how deep emotional entanglement can become a prison. Or worse, a curse. Even today, the journals and stories they left behind are filled with eerie predictions, twisted fictions, and cryptic poetry, echoes of two voices that once whispered only to each other. 33. The Haunting of the Tolman Bunk Beds. In 1987, in the quiet town of Horicon, Wisconsin, the Tolman family purchased a set of second-hand wooden bunk beds for their children. Within days of moving them into the kids' room, strange things began to happen. Voices whispered through the baby monitor. A radio turned on by itself, blasting at full volume. Doors slammed without warning. The children grew sick and terrified, speaking of red eyes watching them in the dark. One night, the father saw a figure in the garage, tall, shadowy, and faceless. Another time, the mother heard something pounding on the walls, but when she looked, there was nothing there. Even visitors felt a heavy presence in the house, often falling ill or experiencing nightmares after staying the night. A local pastor blessed the home, but the disturbances continued. Finally, the family reached a breaking point when the father, sleeping in the children's room to protect them, saw a fiery figure rise from the floor. He shouted for it to leave, and it did. The Tolmans removed the bunk beds and destroyed them. After that, everything stopped. No one knows where the beds came from or what history they carried. But something, whatever it was, clung to them. The case became one of the few hauntings featured on the original Unsolved Mysteries show, and to this day, the Tolman haunting remains one of the most terrifying cases of ordinary objects bringing extraordinary fear. Sometimes, it's not the house that's haunted. It's the furniture you bring inside. 34. The Appalachian Trail Phantom. The Appalachian Trail is a place of peace for many. Stretching over 2,000 miles through forests and mountains, it's a haven for hikers and nature lovers. But deep in its quiet wilderness, there are darker stories. One of the most chilling is the legend of the Appalachian Trail Phantom. Hikers have reported seeing a strange man following them silently through the trees. He never speaks. He never approaches. He just appears, at campsites, on ridgelines, even reflected in the lenses of binoculars, then vanishes. In 2008, a solo hiker named Lila disappeared near the Virginia section of the trail. Her last known journal entry mentioned the man who doesn't blink. Her tent was found undisturbed. Her pack lay zipped. But she was gone. Other hikers later described waking up to see someone standing near their tents, motionless, just watching. One even snapped a blurry photo of a pale figure with empty eyes. Authorities chalked it up to stress, hallucination, or imagination. But those who've spent nights out there alone insist the feeling is real, they are not alone. Some say the phantom is the ghost of a lost hiker who never made it home. Others think it's something older, something tied to the land. Whatever the case, it's become a whispered warning among hikers: if you feel watched on the trail, don't stop. Don't speak. Just keep walking. Because some footsteps behind you don't belong to anyone you'll ever meet. And once you've seen the phantom once, chances are you'll see him again. 35. Cynthia Anderson's Last Day at Work. On August 4, 1981, Cynthia Anderson arrived at her legal office in Toledo, Ohio, just like any other day. She was a reliable, well-liked 20-year-old secretary who rarely missed work. That morning, she parked her car, unlocked the office, and sat at her desk. She was never seen again. No signs of struggle. No note. No screams. Her purse, keys, and car were still at the scene. The only thing missing was Cynthia herself. Co-workers arrived later that morning to find the office unlocked and the radio playing softly. A romance novel sat open on Cynthia's desk, stopped mid-sentence, as if she'd been interrupted. Weeks earlier, she had told friends she was frightened. She felt like she was being watched. She even asked her parents to install a home alarm system. And strangest of all, someone had spray-painted disturbing messages outside the law office. "I love you, Cindy, and watching you." Despite multiple leads, Cynthia's case remains cold. One theory suggests she was abducted by a client or someone who knew her schedule. Others believe she was stalked by a stranger who eventually acted on obsession. A jailhouse informant once claimed to know the truth, linking her to a religious cult, but no evidence backed the claim. What haunts people isn't just the disappearance, it's how normal everything seemed. Cynthia's life simply paused at 9:45 a.m. and never resumed. She stepped into the ordinary and vanished into something terrifying. A life gone in silence. A mystery still waiting for an answer. 36. The Axeman of New Orleans. From May 1918 to October 1919, the city of New Orleans was gripped by fear as an unknown assailant committed a string of brutal murders. Known only as the Axeman, he would break into homes at night, use the victim's own axe, or one he brought, and vanish without a trace. He targeted grocers, couples, entire families. There was no clear motive, nothing stolen, no known connections. Just chaos, blood, and questions. What made the Axeman stand out wasn't just the violence, it was the letter. On March 13, 1919, a local newspaper received a chilling note, supposedly from the killer himself. He wrote that he would strike again, but any home playing jazz music that night would be spared. That evening, the city pulsed with jazz from every house and dance hall. No one died. The Axeman never revealed his identity, and after a final killing, he disappeared as suddenly as he'd arrived. Theories ranged from mafia hits to a deranged serial killer. Some saw a racial motive, as many victims were Italian-American grocers. Others saw something supernatural, especially after that letter, which described the Axeman as a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. The murders were never solved. The axe was never found. And the Axeman was never caught. In the quiet homes of New Orleans, behind creaking shutters and dark hallways, people still remember the nights of terror. And how one killer made an entire city dance for their lives. 37. The man who took photos through the vents. In 2010, a woman named Sarah moved into a small apartment complex in Phoenix, Arizona. The place seemed normal, quiet, affordable, with decent neighbors. But soon after settling in, she began noticing strange things. A draft from the air vents when the AC was off, the faint sound of clicks at night, and an uneasy feeling that someone was always watching. One day, while cleaning, she stood on a chair to dust the ceiling vent. That's when she saw it, a tiny camera lens peeking through the slats. Sarah called the police. When investigators arrived, they found a network of small wireless cameras installed through several units in the building, all routed to a hidden backroom that once served as a maintenance closet. Inside, there were monitors, storage drives, and thousands of photos. Most were of women in their apartments, cooking, changing clothes, sleeping. The culprit? The building's former maintenance man, who had quietly set up the system over months. He had moved out weeks before but was still remotely accessing the feed. Authorities traced his location and arrested him, but many of the victims, including Sarah, were left feeling permanently violated. The idea that someone watched and recorded their most private moments without their knowledge is horrifying. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a monster. It was something far worse, a real person who lived right next door. Sometimes the scariest stories aren't about the unknown. They're about what's known, familiar, and watching you from behind the walls. 38. The Hope Diamond Curse. The Hope Diamond is one of the most famous jewels in the world, 45.52 carats of rare blue diamond, worth hundreds of millions. But behind its dazzling beauty lies a reputation for misfortune and death. Legend says the diamond was stolen from a sacred Hindu idol, cursed by priests who vowed that anyone who possessed it would suffer tragedy. Whether myth or truth, history backs up the curse with a trail of ruin. John Baptiste Taverny, who allegedly stole it, was reportedly torn apart by wild dogs. King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette owned the diamond before losing their heads during the French Revolution. Princess de Lamballe, another owner, was lynched by a mob. A Greek merchant who had the diamond supposedly drove off a cliff with his family inside. Later owners experienced financial ruin, madness, suicide, or sudden death. One heiress, Evelyn Walsh McLean, suffered the death of her child, husband, and eventually her own decline. Each story added to the legend. Eventually, jeweler Harry Winston donated the diamond to the Smithsonian Institution in 1958, sending it through the mail in a plain brown box. It's remained there ever since, safely behind glass. Visitors still whisper about the curse, wondering if it was coincidence or something darker. Some believe the diamond feeds on human suffering. Others say it's simply a cautionary tale about greed and beauty. But one thing's for sure, the Hope Diamond sparkles with history, and possibly a legacy of doom. 39. The Bell Witch. In the early 1800s, the Bell family of Adams, Tennessee, began experiencing strange phenomena on their farm. It started with knocking sounds on the walls, then escalated to chains dragging, disembodied voices, and physical attacks. The entity seemed to focus on young Betsy Bell. She was slapped, pinched, and had her hair pulled by an invisible force. The family's patriarch, John Bell, also suffered. He claimed to feel a constant choking sensation and eventually became bedridden. In 1820, he died, some say, from poisoning by the entity itself. The spirit identified itself as Kate, a neighbor believed to have had a dispute with the Bell family. But the voice changed, lied, mimicked others, and seemed to know things it shouldn't. It would sing hymns, quote scripture, and predict events accurately. It wasn't just a ghost, it was intelligent and malicious. The story became so widespread that even future President Andrew Jackson visited the farm and fled, allegedly saying, "I'd rather fight the British again than face the Bell Witch." After John Bell's death, the activity declined but never fully stopped. Over the years, locals claim to hear whispers in the woods or see shadows darting between the trees. Some say the Bell Witch still guards a nearby cave, which visitors claim is filled with strange energy. It's one of America's most enduring hauntings. A tale of terror passed down through generations, where a simple farmhouse became ground zero for something far beyond explanation and far from finished. 40. The Watcher in the Walls. In 2014, the Broadus family bought their dream home in Westfield, New Jersey, a spacious, elegant house on 657 Boulevard. Just days after closing, they received a letter addressed simply to the new owner. The letter wasn't congratulatory. It was terrifying. The anonymous writer claimed to be the Watcher, tasked with watching the house. They referenced the Broadus children by nickname and described them in disturbing detail. "Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested?" one line read. More letters came, each more invasive than the last. The Watcher claimed their family had been observing the house for generations. They knew when the Broaduses were home. They described specific rooms, routines, even private conversations. The family was gripped with fear. They installed cameras, hired private investigators, and eventually stopped moving in altogether. Police couldn't trace the letters. Neighbors became suspects. Rumors flew. Was it a prank? A bitter local? A mentally disturbed former resident? Despite extensive investigations, the Watcher was never identified. The family eventually sold the home at a loss. Some speculated the entire thing was fabricated for legal or financial reasons. But the letters, eerie, articulate, and deeply personal, suggest otherwise. Whoever wrote them knew too much. The scariest part? There were no break-ins. No violence. Just the constant presence of someone watching, waiting, and writing. Not every horror comes from beyond the grave. Some come from just across the street, with a mailbox, a pen, and an obsession. 41. Amy Lynn Bradley vanished from a cruise. In March 1998, 23-year-old Amy Lynn Bradley boarded the Royal Caribbean cruise ship Rhapsody of the Seas with her family. They were sailing through the Caribbean, celebrating her recent college graduation. On the morning of March 24th, Amy was seen at around 5:30 a.m. on the cabin balcony. By 6 a.m., she was gone. The ship was just off the coast of Curaçao. No alarm was raised. The ship continued on. Amy was a strong swimmer and former lifeguard. Falling overboard seemed unlikely, especially with no splash or signs of struggle. The cruise line delayed notifying authorities and continued its voyage, costing critical search hours. Then came the sightings. Over the years, tourists reported seeing a woman resembling Amy on several Caribbean islands, often in distress, accompanied by men. One Canadian man claimed a woman approached him in a Curaçao brothel, begging for help, saying her name was Amy before she was pulled away. Amy's parents received an email from someone claiming to have seen her in a Caribbean nightclub. A Navy officer swore he saw her on a beach but feared intervening. The FBI got involved, but no confirmed leads ever panned out. Many believe Amy was abducted and forced into human trafficking. Others wonder if she escaped and is hiding. What makes her story so chilling is the setting, a luxury cruise where guests are pampered and safe. Yet, someone vanished without a trace. Amy's photo still circulates, and her family still searches. Her case remains one of the most haunting disappearances at sea. 42. The Time Slip in Versailles. In 1901, two British women, Charlotte and Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, visited the Palace of Versailles in France. What should have been a simple historical outing turned into one of the most famous alleged time slips in history. While exploring the gardens near the Petit Trianon, the women reported an overwhelming sense of gloom. They encountered strange people dressed in outdated 18th century clothing. A woman sketching on the grass. Men in tricorn hats. They felt invisible, like ghosts moving through a scene they weren't meant to see. They asked for directions but were either ignored or given vague answers. When they finally reached the Petit Trianon, everything snapped back to normal: crowds, sunlight, modern-day tourists. Disturbed, the women researched what they saw. They later claimed they had seen Queen Marie Antoinette herself sketching in the grass, on the very day in 1792 when she learned of the approaching mob during the French Revolution. Their book, An Adventure, detailed the encounter and sparked debate for decades. Skeptics argue it was fantasy or a hallucination. Others believe they briefly crossed into the past, a time slip. Time slips are rare but reported worldwide. People seeing buildings, clothes, or vehicles that don't belong to their time. Whether illusion or interdimensional glitch, the Versailles incident haunts because of its credibility. The women were scholars, not thrill seekers. In a place steeped in history and tragedy, who's to say the past doesn't occasionally replay itself, for those in just the right place, at just the right moment? 43. My doppelganger talked to my mom. In 2008, a college student named Leah returned to her childhood home for winter break. One afternoon, she walked into the kitchen to find her mother pale and shaken. "Why are you wearing the same clothes?" her mother asked. Leah was confused. She had just gotten dressed for the day. That's when her mom explained, minutes earlier, she had spoken to Leah. Or someone who looked exactly like her. This Leah had walked in, smiled, and headed silently into the hallway without a word. Her mother followed, puzzled, but the girl was gone. Leah swore she hadn't been there. Her mother hadn't imagined it either. She described her outfit, her mannerisms, even the chipped nail polish on her left hand. In folklore, this is called a doppelganger, a mysterious double of a living person, often viewed as an omen of death or misfortune. Reports of doppelganger sightings go back centuries. Abraham Lincoln himself allegedly saw his double in a mirror before his assassination. What chills people most is how personal the phenomenon feels. It's not a shadowy figure or ghost. It's you, or someone wearing your face, your voice, your habits. Leah's mother became obsessed with the sighting. She installed cameras, burned sage, even consulted a priest. But the double never returned. To this day, Leah wonders, was it a glitch in reality? A trick of the mind? Or a version of herself from a timeline just slightly off? 44. Zygmunt Adamski's strange death. On June 6, 1980, the body of 56-year-old coal miner Zygmunt Adamski was found on top of a coal pile in Todmorden, England. He had been missing for 5 days. What baffled authorities wasn't just where he was found, but the condition of the body. Adamski was still wearing his suit, but his shirt was missing. His hair had been neatly trimmed, and he had strange burn marks on his neck and shoulders. These burns were treated with a mysterious green gel, one that doctors couldn't identify. There were no signs of struggle. No dirt or coal dust on his clothes, despite being placed on a coal pile. It was as if his body had been gently set down from above. Constable Alan Godfrey, one of the first on the scene, would later claim he saw a UFO just months later while on patrol in the same area. He even underwent hypnosis and described being taken aboard a craft. Some link Adamski's death to possible alien abduction. Others point to government experiments, secret abductions, or simply an elaborate murder staged to confuse. No suspects. No cause of death. No trace of where he'd been for 5 days. Adamski's widow and family never got answers. The police report remains one of the strangest in British history. The green gel? Still unidentified. Whether otherworldly or human, whoever took Zygmunt and returned him, left behind only questions. And a deeply unsettling silence. 45. The midnight game gone wrong. Urban legends often warn us not to play with the supernatural. But the midnight game dares people to break that rule. Supposedly a pagan ritual used to punish rule breakers, the midnight game involves summoning a dark entity into your home. To play, one must write their name on paper, prick a finger to add a drop of blood, then place it at the front door. At midnight, you knock 22 times, with the final knock landing precisely at 12 a.m. Then, you begin walking through the dark. The goal? Avoid the entity for 3 hours and 33 minutes. No lights. No sleeping. No leaving. One Reddit user, Jake, claimed he and his friends tried the game for fun. At first, it was a joke, running around in the dark, whispering nervously. But things turned quickly. Their candles kept blowing out. Doors slammed. One friend heard her name whispered inches from her ear. Another swore he saw a figure, tall, featureless, standing at the end of the hallway, unmoving. When one panicked and turned on a flashlight, it flickered and died instantly. Phones lost signal. The house felt like it was shrinking. By 3:33 a.m., they ran outside, huddled on the lawn until sunrise. Later, each of them reported nightmares. Some heard knocks at their doors at night for weeks after. Was it a psychological trick? Or did they invite something in that never truly left? The midnight game warns, this is not a joke. And if you break the rules, you may not like who or what breaks in. 46. The missing Sodder children. On Christmas Eve in 1945, a fire broke out at the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia. George and Jenny Sodder, along with 9 of their 10 children, were inside. 5 children supposedly perished in the blaze, but their remains were never found. The fire started just after midnight. George and Jenny escaped with 4 of their children. The others were said to be trapped upstairs. But when George tried to re-enter, the ladder was missing, the water barrel was frozen, and both his trucks, usually used for emergencies, wouldn't start. By the time help arrived, the house had been reduced to ashes. No bones. No teeth. No trace of the 5 children. Theories swirled. Jenny tested animal bones in a fire to see if anything would remain, some did. A telephone repairman confirmed the line had been cut. Witnesses claimed to see the children in a passing car. A woman swore she saw them weeks later at a motel. George and Jenny erected a billboard on Route 16, pleading for information. Theories ranged from kidnapping to mafia retaliation. The family received a mysterious photograph in the 1960s of a young man they believed to be one of the missing boys, grown up. Officially, the case remains unsolved. But to this day, people ask, did the Sodder children really die in that fire, or were they taken? Sometimes, horror doesn't come from ghosts or monsters, but from silence, secrets, and a Christmas that never ended. 47. The Icebox Murders. In 1965, Houston police made a gruesome discovery inside a modest home on Driscoll Street. Fred and Edwina Rogers, an elderly couple, hadn't been seen in days. When officers broke in, they found something chilling: Fred's and Edwina's dismembered bodies stuffed inside the refrigerator. The kitchen was clean, too clean. No blood. No signs of struggle. It was as if someone had taken great care to erase all evidence. But in the fridge, behind neatly stacked shelves of food, were pieces of the couple wrapped in butcher paper. The prime suspect? Their reclusive adult son, Charles Rogers. Charles, a brilliant but eccentric man, was nowhere to be found. Neighbors described him as quiet, intelligent, and intensely private. He communicated with his parents through notes slipped under doors. After the murders, he vanished, leaving behind a blood-stained sore and a locked bedroom full of maps, books, and cryptic writings. Despite an international manhunt, Charles Rogers was never seen again. Some theorists believe he fled to South America. Others link him to covert intelligence work and conspiracy theories involving the JFK assassination. The house was eventually demolished, and the murders faded from headlines. But the image of a clean kitchen hiding a monstrous crime lingers in Houston's memory. Who killed Fred and Edwina Rogers? And why? Until Charles is found, or a body is recovered, we may never know. What's more terrifying than a killer hiding in plain sight is one who disappears forever. 48. The Hands Resist Him, Haunted eBay Painting. In the early 2000s, an eerie painting titled The Hands Resist Him went viral on eBay. The listing warned, this painting was haunted. The image showed a young boy and a lifelike doll standing in front of a glass door, behind which countless disembodied hands pressed against the glass. According to the seller, strange things happened after the painting was hung. They claimed the figures moved during the night. The boy would vanish from the canvas. The doll's eyes followed people. And sometimes, the figures would exit the painting altogether. Buyers were warned. Yet thousands viewed the listing. The painting sold quickly. The artist, Bill Stoneham, had painted it in the 1970s. He based the boy on a childhood photo and the doll on a gallery prop. The hands, he said, represented other lives trying to reach through from another dimension. The gallery owner and a critic who originally displayed the work both died mysteriously within a year. Since the eBay incident, the painting has changed hands but is now stored in a private collection. Those who've seen it in person claim to feel dizzy, uneasy, or watched. Others refuse to even be in the same room. It may be just paint and canvas, but the fear is real. Whether cursed or simply creepy, The Hands Resist Him proves that sometimes, art doesn't imitate life, it reaches for it. And maybe, just maybe, it reaches back. 49. The Circleville Letters. In 1976, residents of Circleville, Ohio, began receiving anonymous letters filled with personal information and venomous accusations. These weren't just prank notes, they included private details about affairs, financial troubles, and threats of violence. Some of the letters predicted tragedy. Others claimed to be watching the recipients' homes. No one knew who was behind them. The most disturbing target was Mary Gillespie, a school bus driver accused of having an affair. Her husband Ron received letters too, one of which warned him to put a stop to it or risk death. Not long after, Ron died in a mysterious car crash. His gun had been fired once, though no bullet or explanation was ever found. Even after Ron's death, the letters continued. Eventually, Mary's brother-in-law, Paul Freshour, was arrested and convicted of attempted murder after a booby-trapped sign was found on Mary's route. He denied involvement but spent a decade in prison. Strangely, the letters kept arriving, even while Paul was behind bars. Experts still debate whether he was innocent, a scapegoat, or part of something larger. Handwriting analysis was inconclusive. No DNA was recovered. And when Paul was released, the letters stopped. The Circleville letters remain an open mystery. Were they the work of one disturbed person? A town conspiracy? Or something even stranger? The psychological horror wasn't just the threat, it was the idea that someone close, someone trusted, was always watching and writing. 50. The tap-tap on the window. It started as a single tap. Light, rhythmic, almost curious. On a cold November night in a quiet neighborhood, 13-year-old Emily sat reading in her upstairs bedroom when she heard it tap-tap on her window. Her heart skipped. Her room was on the second floor. No tree branches reached that high. No balcony. Nothing. She pulled back the curtain. No one. Just the wind brushing dried leaves across the lawn. She convinced herself it was her imagination, until the next night, and the one after that. The tapping returned every evening at exactly 10:17 p.m. Her parents heard nothing. They checked the exterior, no marks, no footprints. Emily began keeping her phone ready to record, but every time she opened the camera, the sound stopped. One night, she didn't look. She hid under the covers. The tapping grew louder, more aggressive, then stopped abruptly. The next morning, her window was smeared with what looked like handprints on the outside. But again, her parents saw nothing unusual. Emily began to dread bedtime. Her grades slipped. She became withdrawn. Then, after a week of silence, she found a note slipped through a crack in the window frame. It read, "Thanks for finally listening." They moved a month later. Was it a stalker? A prank? Something paranormal? The unanswered question lingers like a chill. Sometimes, what we fear most isn't the scream in the night, it's the soft knock that keeps coming, even when no one's supposed to be there. 51. The disembodied voice that led us out. In 2003, a family got lost while hiking in the remote forested region of Northern California. They had veered off trail, and as night fell, panic set in. Cell signal was gone. Supplies were low. Temperatures dropped quickly. As they huddled together trying to stay calm, the youngest child, 6-year-old Lily, said something that chilled her parents. "The man in the woods says we have to go this way." There was no one there. She insisted she heard a voice, gentle, calm, and oddly familiar, guiding her through the darkness. She pulled at her mother's sleeve and pointed toward a densely wooded path. With no better plan, the parents followed. For nearly an hour, Lily stopped periodically, listening to something only she could hear. Then, suddenly, they emerged near a ranger's cabin. They had no idea how they got there. According to maps, they should have been miles off course. When the ranger heard their story, he paled. Decades earlier, a search and rescue volunteer had died in those very woods, trying to find another lost child. That volunteer's name was Thomas. Lily had never met him, but when shown a photo from the ranger's wall, she pointed and said, "That's the man who helped us." Skeptics chalk it up to coincidence or subconscious intuition. But the family still swears they were led by something unseen that night. It wasn't fear that found them, it was a voice. A whisper. A guide. Sometimes, the forest doesn't want you lost. Sometimes, it remembers who came before. 52. The Yuba County Five. In February 1978, 5 men, Gary Mathers, Bill Sterling, Jack Madruga, Ted Weiher, and Jack Hewitt, attended a college basketball game in Chico, California. They never returned home. Their car was later found abandoned on a remote mountain road, far off their expected route. It was in working condition, with gas in the tank. But the men were gone. Months later, The bodies of 4 were found scattered across the Sierra Nevada wilderness. Ted Wyher's body was discovered in a ranger trailer, wrapped in sheets, with food in the pantry untouched. His beard suggested he'd survived for weeks. Jack Huett's bones were found miles away. The other 2 were nearby, appearing to have died from exposure. Gary Mathias, diagnosed with schizophrenia, was never found. The question haunting everyone: why did they detour so far off course into the snow-covered mountains? The men weren't equipped for the cold. They had no winter gear and weren't hikers. Wyher's body in the trailer showed signs he tried to survive, yet never touched the food or used the heating. Did he fear someone was coming? Some suspect foul play, perhaps coercion or a threat. Others suggest a psychotic break or group panic. But nothing adds up. Why abandon a perfectly working car? Why scatter miles apart in dangerous terrain? What drove them into the wilderness that night? The case remains open. The Yuba County Five vanished into the woods and left behind a trail of questions darker than the forest itself. 53. The man living in the attic. In 2008, a Pittsburgh man noticed food vanishing from his fridge, doors left ajar, and strange sounds at night. Assuming it was forgetfulness or a possible rodent issue, he set up a hidden camera in his kitchen. What he discovered was far more disturbing. Reviewing the footage, he watched in horror as a woman emerged from a ceiling vent, quietly descended into the kitchen, ate his food, used the bathroom, and retreated back into hiding. She had been secretly living in his attic crawlspace for weeks, maybe longer. Police arrived and found the woman still hiding in the cramped attic. She was homeless and claimed she'd found the open vent and used it as a safe place to sleep. She'd sneak down only when she thought the house was empty or the homeowner was asleep. The man had been living with a stranger above his head, unaware he wasn't truly alone. She heard him talking, sleeping, working. She knew his schedule. What makes this story chilling isn't malice, but the sheer invasion of space. Your home is your sanctuary. The idea that someone could be living just feet above you, watching your every move, is terrifying. And if he hadn't set up the camera, who knows how long she would have stayed. Cases like this aren't unheard of. Similar incidents have occurred elsewhere: attic dwellers, crawlspace intruders, even people living inside walls. It's a real-life horror. The monster isn't under your bed. It might be above the ceiling. 54. The ghost in room 428. At Ohio University's Wilson Hall, room 428 has gained a reputation as one of the most haunted dorm rooms in America. The school has since closed the room to students, claiming it's uninhabitable. But the stories persist. Students who lived there reported unexplained banging on the walls, books flying off shelves, and electronics turning on and off by themselves. More disturbing, several claimed to see a ghostly man in the room, sometimes standing silently in the corner, other times sitting at the desk, staring. He never spoke. One resident said she awoke to find strange symbols drawn on her mirror in condensation, despite no one else being in the room. Another claimed her roommate dropped out after witnessing their locked door unlock and open by itself, 3 nights in a row. Some say the haunting is linked to the room's location at the university's spiritual center, once thought to align with sacred Native American burial grounds. Others believe a student who practiced occult rituals there left behind a spiritual residue. Whatever the origin, university officials eventually sealed the room. Even maintenance staff reportedly avoid entering. Dorms are supposed to be noisy, lively, full of stress and late-night pizza. But Wilson Hall's room 428 harbored something else, something cold, quiet, and watching. When your sanctuary becomes the setting of a ghost story, sleep becomes difficult. And sometimes, even when you leave the room, something follows. 55. The toy store employee who secretly lived there. In 2009, a night security guard at a large toy store in Washington state noticed strange anomalies on the surveillance footage. Toys moved on their own, lights flickered, and shadowy figures seemed to shift across the aisles. It wasn't ghosts, though. What the cameras eventually caught was far stranger. A former employee, laid off months earlier, had secretly returned, living inside the store after hours. He built a makeshift sleeping area high in the storage racks, tucked behind boxes and seasonal displays. At night, he'd creep down to eat snacks, watch DVDs on the demo TVs, and even play with the toys. He'd been living there for over 4 months. He survived by using employee uniforms he'd kept, blending in during the day to avoid detection. He knew the cleaning crew's schedule. He even learned to avoid motion sensors. When finally caught, he wasn't violent, just tired and eerily calm. He said the store felt more like home than anywhere else. What disturbed workers most wasn't just the breach of security, it was realizing how often they'd passed him without knowing. Some had spoken to him, assuming he was still employed. The sense of being watched, of someone living just out of view, lingered long after he was removed. Though no harm was done, the story became a cautionary tale. Sometimes, horror doesn't come from spirits or monsters. Sometimes, it's a person hiding in plain sight, quietly reshaping the borders between public and private, safety and fear. 56. Voices in the walls. A couple in upstate New York bought an old farmhouse with charm and quirks. Creaky floors, drafty hallways, and a maze of strange vents. At first, it was all part of the rustic appeal. Until the voices began. At night, they heard murmurs. Not through the windows or doors, but from inside the walls. Soft, indistinct conversations. Sometimes laughter. Other times sobbing. The husband assumed it was old pipes, or maybe animals in the crawlspace. But the voices were clear, speaking full sentences, calling their names, recounting private moments they had never told anyone. One night, the wife followed the sound to a section of wall near the staircase. It was cold to the touch. When they finally decided to investigate, they found something unsettling, a hidden cavity between walls, large enough for someone to crawl through. Inside, they found discarded food wrappers, a child's shoe, and a diary with entries from someone who had apparently lived there without the homeowners knowing. Police never identified who the person was, or how long they had been staying there. But after sealing off the space and updating the security, the voices continued. They brought in paranormal investigators, who claimed the house had a residual haunting, a spiritual echo trapped in the walls. Whether ghost or intruder, the effect was the same. They never felt alone again. The scariest part? You can close a door, board a window, but you can't shut out what's already inside your walls, whispering your name when the lights go out. 57. The Mothman Sightings. In 1966, residents of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, began reporting sightings of a bizarre creature, a tall, winged humanoid with glowing red eyes. The first major report came from 2 couples driving near an abandoned munitions factory, known locally as the TNT area, who claimed a massive creature chased their car, flying effortlessly and screeching like a maniacal bird. Soon, more sightings followed. People described similar details: a 7-foot-tall figure with bat-like wings, silent flight, and terrifying eyes that radiated a sense of doom. Animals went missing. Dogs were found mutilated. And always, the creature was near. Then, in December 1967, tragedy struck. The Silver Bridge, connecting Point Pleasant to Ohio, collapsed during rush hour, killing 46 people. After that, the Mothman sightings ceased. This timing fueled speculation that the Mothman was a harbinger, an omen of disaster, not the cause of it. Some think it was warning people. Others believe it was feeding off the fear. Paranormal theorists even link it to extraterrestrial activity and Men in Black reports that emerged during the same period. To this day, no one knows what it was. Was it a mutated bird? A shared hallucination? A being from another dimension? The Mothman has become folklore, but ask a local, and they'll likely lower their voice and tell you they believe. Because once you've seen those eyes staring at you from the trees, you never forget. Especially when the next disaster might just be around the corner, and someone, or something, is already watching. 58. The lead masks case in Brazil. In 1966, 2 men were found dead on a hillside in Niterói, Brazil, under circumstances so bizarre that investigators were left baffled for decades. Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana were both electronic technicians. They were discovered lying side by side, dressed in matching suits, waterproof raincoats, and, most eerily, lead masks over their eyes, the kind used to protect from radiation. There were no signs of violence or struggle. Beside their bodies were a notebook with cryptic instructions: be at the place at 16:30. Take capsules after the effect protects metals. Wait for the mask signal. No one knows what that meant. An autopsy revealed no trauma or poison, though the internal organs were too decomposed for thorough toxicology. The area held no signs of ritual or cult activity, and their families were stunned. By all accounts, the men were normal, educated, and not involved in anything unusual. Some believe they were experimenting with telepathic or spiritual communication, perhaps trying to contact aliens or another dimension. Others think it was a botched science experiment. But the lead masks, the strange note, and the complete lack of explanation has cemented the case as one of the most chilling unsolved deaths in modern Brazilian history. To this day, the hillside remains quiet, but the mystery endures. 2 men, lead masks, and a plan that never revealed its purpose. 59. The Bennington Triangle. Between 1945 and 1950, an area of southwestern Vermont known as the Bennington Triangle became the site of a string of strange disappearances that remain unsolved to this day. It's a dense forested region surrounding Glastonbury Mountain, already steeped in local legend and Native American folklore. The most famous case occurred in 1946, when Paula Weldon, an 18-year-old college student, went hiking and vanished without a trace. Hundreds of volunteers and even the FBI searched, but no clues were ever found. Her disappearance was so shocking it led to the formation of the Vermont State Police. Over the next few years, several more people disappeared in the area. An experienced woodsman, a man whose body was later found in a spot that had been thoroughly searched before, and even an elderly woman who vanished from a moving bus. What unites these cases is the total lack of evidence. No signs of struggle, no bodies, in most cases, and no good leads. Some locals blame the terrain, it's easy to get lost. Others whisper about supernatural forces, dimensional rifts, or even Bigfoot. Despite decades of speculation, the Bennington Triangle holds onto its secrets. People still hike the trails, but some carry compasses and always let someone know when they expect to return. Just in case. 60. The severed feet that washed ashore. In the late 2000s, residents of the Pacific Northwest were startled when human feet, still in shoes, began washing up on beaches in British Columbia and Washington state. Not 1, not 2, but over a dozen feet were discovered between 2007 and the early 2010s. The phenomenon triggered a media frenzy and wild theories. Were these the victims of a serial killer? Human trafficking? A cult? The feet were usually cleanly severed and encased in sneakers, which kept them buoyant and helped preserve the remains. Forensic analysis revealed that most of the feet came from different individuals, and many had been separated from the body through natural decomposition, not foul play. When a body is in the water long enough, joints eventually weaken, and feet are among the first to detach. The rubber of modern sneakers helped them float to shore. Authorities linked several of the feet to people who had died by suicide or in accidents near the water. Still, some cases remain unidentified, and the sheer number of discoveries raised eyebrows. Even with logical explanations, something about the image, a severed foot in a shoe, drifting silently to shore, is inherently creepy. That these were real people, now reduced to just one lost part, speaks to both the power of nature and the lingering horror of the unknown. And for many, the question still remains, why so many feet, and why here? 61. When the Ouija board said my name. It started as a joke between 3 friends during a sleepover. They dimmed the lights, lit candles, and pulled out an old Ouija board one of them found in their attic. The plan was to ask silly questions, maybe scare each other for fun. But things quickly turned unsettling. At first, the planchette moved slowly, spelling out gibberish. They laughed it off. Then someone asked, "Who are we speaking to?" The response, "Watching." They laughed again, nervous this time, assuming someone was pushing it. Then came the moment none of them would ever forget. One friend jokingly said, "Okay, ghost, what's my name?" The planchette moved fast, deliberately. Letter by letter, it spelled her full name. First and last. No one else in the room knew her last name. It was her first time at that sleepover. Silence. Then panic. Everyone swore they didn't move it. The girl turned pale. How would it know that? They ended the session immediately, saying goodbye, just in case. But that night, strange things happened. A door slammed on its own. One of them swore they heard someone whispering in the hallway. The girl whose name was spelled out? She had a recurring nightmare for weeks, a shadowy figure at the foot of her bed, spelling her name over and over again. Ouija boards are marketed as games. But stories like this one are reminders. Sometimes you get more than you ask for. And sometimes, it already knows who you are. 62. He knew my dream before I did. I had a friend in college, quiet, observant, a little odd. We'd sit outside late at night, talking about dreams, life, and the weird things that hang in the air when the world's asleep. One night, I told him I'd been having strange, vivid dreams that I couldn't remember by morning. He nodded like he understood. Then he said something that froze me. "You dream about the red hallway, right?" I had never mentioned that detail to anyone. But he described it perfectly. A long red corridor, dimly lit, endless, with a door at the end I never had the courage to open. I asked how he knew. He looked away. "Because I dream it too. And last night, you were standing next to me." I laughed at first, uncomfortable. Maybe it was coincidence. But that night, when I fell asleep, the red hallway returned, and this time, he was standing there, looking at me. We said nothing. Just stared. When I woke up, my phone had a message from him. "You saw me, didn't you?" After that, we both stopped talking about dreams. We stopped being friends, too. Not out of anger, just an unspoken decision. We didn't want to know more. I've never seen the hallway again. But sometimes I wonder if he still walks it alone, or if he's found someone else in his dreams. Some connections go deeper than friendship, deeper than sleep. Some things can't be explained. And some doors are better left unopened. 63. The woman who found her double already dead. A woman in her 30s moved to a quiet town in the UK to start fresh. She bought a charming cottage, filled it with books and plants, and settled into a peaceful routine. One day, while browsing local history in the town archives, she found an old black and white photo from the 1930s and dropped the file. The woman in the photo looked exactly like her. Same face, same expression, same birthmark under the left eye. Stunned, she read the caption, "Margaret Lively, died 1932, house fire, same address." It was the very cottage she now lived in. At first, she thought it was a coincidence or a prank. But the resemblance was undeniable. Curious and disturbed, she dug deeper. Margaret had died in a mysterious fire after neighbors claimed she had seen someone just like her walking outside the house days before. Then strange things began happening. Mirrors fogged up with handprints. Doors she locked would creak open. One night, she woke to find her own reflection smiling when she wasn't. She moved out soon after. Some believe in reincarnation. Others believe in doppelgangers, identical versions of us, sometimes seen as omens or warnings. This woman didn't wait to find out which it was. And who can blame her? Finding someone who looks just like you is rare. Finding their grave, their death story, and their ghost still living in your home? That's not coincidence. That's a haunting that doesn't ask for permission, it already knows you. 64. The man who followed me hiking. It started as a solo hiking trip through the Cascade Mountains. The air was crisp, the path familiar, and I welcomed the solitude. But within an hour, I noticed something strange, footsteps. Not mine. Slightly behind. Pausing when I paused. Light crunches in the leaves that mirrored my own pace, but never overtook me. At first, I chalked it up to paranoia. Maybe a fellow hiker was simply keeping their distance. But when I stopped to rest by a stream and looked behind me, there was no one. No rustling. No movement. Yet the moment I resumed hiking, the soft footsteps returned. At the base of a ridge, I turned sharply and hid behind a boulder. I waited. 10 minutes. 15. Then I saw him. A man, scruffy and tall, walking slowly with his head low. He wasn't dressed for hiking. No gear, no backpack, just old jeans and a faded jacket. I held my breath. He walked past, glanced around, then continued down the trail I had just left. I stayed hidden until I was sure he was gone, then took a long, steep detour down an unmarked path, heading back to my car as quickly as possible. When I got to the trailhead, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper. Just a torn piece of paper with the words, "Nice shortcut." I never saw him again. But I haven't hiked alone since. 65. The black figure at the edge of the bed. For months, I thought the nightmares were just stress. I'd wake in the early hours, heart pounding, convinced someone had been in the room. Always the same, a dark shape standing at the foot of my bed. I could never see its face, only that it was tall, unmoving, and silent. Then I'd blink, and it would be gone. I started going to bed later and later, hoping to avoid sleep. But eventually, exhaustion won. That's when it got worse. I began waking up completely paralyzed. Eyes wide open, unable to speak or move. And there it was, closer now. Sometimes beside the bed. Sometimes leaning toward me. One night, I felt its weight pressing down on the mattress. The covers pulled tight around my ankles. My breathing stopped. I remember thinking, this is it. This is how I die. Then, just as suddenly, I could move. The figure vanished. I sat up, drenched in sweat, heart racing. I installed a camera. For 3 nights, nothing. But on the 4th, around 3:33 a.m., the camera glitched. A burst of static. A single frame where something dark seemed to loom at the bed's edge. I moved out shortly after. Told myself it was sleep paralysis. A trick of the mind. But some nights, I wake up and feel the weight return. As if it followed me. Some people say it's a demon. Others call it the Hat Man. I just call it what it is, the thing that waits for sleep to hold you down. Underscore 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 underscore. 66. The Little Bastard Car Curse. James Dean called it Little Bastard. His Porsche 550 Spider was sleek, fast, and unlucky from the start. He had the words painted on the back just before his fatal crash in 1955. On September 30th, Dean was driving to a race in Salinas, California. A Ford sedan turned left in front of him on Route 466. Dean couldn't avoid the collision. He died almost instantly. But the legend didn't end there. George Barris, who customized the car, bought the wreck. As he transported it, it slipped and crushed a mechanic's legs. Later, 2 doctors bought parts of the engine and put them into their race cars. Both crashed. One died instantly. The other was severely injured when his car locked up during a turn. The rest of the car seemed cursed too. Tires from the Spider blew out simultaneously on another vehicle. A garage storing the remains burned to the ground. Pieces stolen from the wreck reportedly brought misfortune or death to anyone who owned them. Eventually, Little Bastard was put on display until it vanished during transport. It hasn't been seen since. Skeptics say it's coincidence. Others say the car was cursed from the beginning, imbued with a darkness tied to Dean's untimely death. Whatever the truth, the wreckage left behind more than twisted metal. It carried a trail of tragedy, whispered warnings, and a name that still evokes dread in car enthusiasts and ghost hunters alike. Little Bastard lives on, as a cursed relic lost to time. 67. The Mirror That Smiled. In a dusty antique store in Savannah, Georgia, a woman purchased an ornate Victorian mirror for a bargain. It was tall, gold-trimmed, and beautifully aged. But the store owner warned her, half joking, that it had character and that she should cover it at night. Back home, she hung it in her bedroom. That's when things began to shift. At first, it was subtle. She thought she saw movement in the reflection, not behind her, but within the mirror itself. One night, she noticed that when she looked away from the mirror, the reflection lingered a split second too long. Another night, she swore she saw her own reflection smile. Except she wasn't smiling. The most terrifying moment came when she walked into her room and saw her reflection already standing in front of the mirror, unmoving, staring straight at her. She screamed and ran. But when she brought friends back, the mirror behaved normally. Until, one night, her boyfriend caught it on video, her reflection smiling slowly, teeth bared, while she looked on, expressionless. They took the mirror to a paranormal investigator, who claimed the glass had a history of being in homes with strange deaths. Some believed it trapped energy, or even souls. The woman no longer has the mirror. She covered it and left it on the curb. But sometimes she wonders if someone else picked it up, and whether it's still smiling. 68. The Neighbor Who Listened Through the Walls. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, a young couple moved into a duplex. Their next-door neighbor was an older man, polite, soft-spoken, and seemingly harmless. But almost immediately, they noticed strange sounds coming from the shared wall, scratching, then whispering, then their own names. At first, they assumed it was the building creaking or an overactive imagination. But the whispers continued. The man would ask questions through the wall, "What are you doing now?" or "Are you home alone?" His voice was barely audible, but unmistakable. They tried confronting him politely. He denied everything. They installed white noise machines, rearranged furniture, even called in professionals to inspect for wiring or plumbing anomalies. Nothing explained the voices. One night, the husband woke up to the sound of breathing, right behind their headboard. He knocked on the wall. The breathing stopped. Moments later, a soft knock echoed back. The final straw came when the wife found a small hole drilled in the wall behind a painting, aligned perfectly with their bed. On the other side, a chair, placed neatly in the man's living room. They moved out the next day and filed a report. Police found dozens of journals in the man's apartment filled with notes about them. Every conversation, every argument, every intimate moment, all transcribed. No charges were filed. But the horror wasn't criminal, it was psychological. The feeling of being watched, listened to, recorded, and knowing the person behind the wall didn't want to hurt you. He just wanted to know everything. 69. The Boy Who Spoke in Tongues. A family in rural Kentucky reported something deeply unsettling about their 6-year-old son. He was bright and playful, but one night, he woke up screaming, speaking in a language no one could recognize. At first, they thought it was a bad dream. But it happened again and again. Linguists and local clergy were consulted. One expert believed the language resembled ancient Aramaic, long dead. Another said it sounded like a hybrid of Latin and something even older. During these episodes, the boy's demeanor changed. His eyes would roll back slightly, and he'd speak with clarity, not like a child babbling, but like someone reciting. Sometimes he'd chant. Other times, he'd shout commands. Things escalated when he started writing symbols on the walls. Strange glyphs, spirals, and crosses. The family took video recordings to document it. One such clip made its way to a university professor who claimed the boy was referencing passages from ancient texts that hadn't been translated in centuries. Frightened, the parents called in a priest. During the blessing, the boy reportedly growled and spoke in what sounded like multiple voices. But then, just as suddenly, he returned to normal, confused and scared. Doctors found nothing neurologically wrong. Eventually, the episode stopped as the boy aged. He remembers nothing. But the walls kept the marks. And one researcher who studied the footage still wonders, how did a child, with no exposure to ancient texts, speak languages no one had heard in 1,000 years? 70. The shadow people in the nursing home. In a quiet nursing home nestled in rural Indiana, staff members began to report something strange. It started with a night nurse claiming to see shadowy figures moving along the halls, silent, fast, and always just out of reach. At first, others chalked it up to stress or lack of sleep. But then the sightings increased. Multiple residents began to speak of figures standing by their beds at night. These weren't vague dreams or hallucinations. Descriptions were eerily consistent. Tall, thin silhouettes, darker than the surrounding dark, often wearing wide-brimmed hats. They never spoke, just watched. Security cameras picked up flickers, brief, unexplainable shadows flitting across rooms. Motion sensors would activate in unoccupied wings. Lights would flicker. One staff member quit after she entered a resident's room and saw 3 dark figures standing at the foot of the bed. When she turned on the light, they were gone, but the resident died hours later. Some believe these are sleep paralysis entities slipping through the veil. Others claim they are death omens, apparitions that appear before someone passes. Whatever they are, the fear they leave behind is real. One nurse started keeping logs of when the shadows were seen. Disturbingly, many of those residents died within days. Eventually, the report stopped, not because the shadows were gone, but because staff simply refused to talk about them anymore. Silence, after all, sometimes feels safer than acknowledging the things we don't understand, especially when those things are watching us from the dark. 71. The ghost that kept rearranging things. In a cozy second-floor apartment in Portland, a young couple began to notice something odd. It started small. Keys moved from their hook to the kitchen counter, shoes lined up neatly by the door even though neither of them did it. They laughed it off at first, joking that their place had a ghost with OCD. But soon, the occurrences became too specific to ignore. Books rearranged themselves on shelves. Photographs turned backward in their frames. A vase of flowers appeared in the living room, though neither partner had bought them. When they asked neighbors if anyone had a spare key, no one admitted to it. The couple set up cameras in the apartment. What they saw chilled them. While they were out, the footage showed furniture slowly shifting. Cupboards opened on their own. Once, a shadow moved across the floor though no one was home. Even creepier, objects didn't just move, they moved into new, often symmetrical arrangements. They brought in a medium, who claimed the spirit was not malicious, but deeply unsettled. She described it as a former tenant who disliked disorder and was still trying to make the space right. After a small ritual and a respectful conversation directed at the spirit, the rearranging stopped. The couple left the apartment a year later. The next tenant, unaware of the history, mentioned in passing that someone keeps tidying up when she's away. Not every haunting comes with screams or blood. Sometimes, it's just a quiet obsession with keeping things, just so. 72. The room that wasn't on the floor plan. A newlywed couple moved into a charming, old Victorian home in Savannah. While renovating the upstairs hallway, they discovered something odd. A door hidden behind layers of plaster and wallpaper. Intrigued, they carefully removed the covering and found a narrow passage leading to a small, windowless room. The strange part? This room wasn't listed on the blueprints. Not even the home inspector had noticed it. Inside, they found a child's mattress, an old wooden chair, and crayon drawings covering the walls. Some were innocent, sunshine, animals, but others were unsettling. Figures with hollow eyes, a tall dark shape looming over beds, and words like "Don't let him in." There were no signs anyone had used the room recently, but dust patterns suggested it hadn't been completely abandoned either. Sometimes, the couple heard faint noises from that side of the house, scratching, whispering, even sobbing. At night, the temperature near the sealed door would drop drastically. They called in a local historian, who told them the home once belonged to a man rumored to have locked his troubled child in a hidden space to keep them out of sight. The town archives had no death certificate for the child. After sealing the room again and blessing the house, the disturbances lessened, but never fully disappeared. They never spoke of it to guests. When they eventually sold the house, the new owners knocked down that part of the wall. Behind it, the hidden room was still there, untouched. Waiting. 73. The hotel where guests vanished. In the heart of a busy downtown area sat a modest, old hotel, nothing fancy, but always fully booked. Locals had whispered about strange goings-on for years, but no one took it seriously until guests began to vanish without a trace. Between 2005 and 2013, at least 4 people checked in and were never seen again. They left no signs of struggle. Security footage showed them entering the hotel, sometimes even entering their rooms, but never leaving. Staff who cleaned the rooms the next day would find luggage, wallets, and clothes, but no guest. The rooms were locked from the inside. Police investigations led nowhere. There were no signs of foul play, no forced entries, no credible leads. Room 313 became the focal point after 2 disappearances occurred in that same suite. The room was eventually closed to the public, but the disappearances didn't stop, they just moved to different floors. Some say it's a portal. Others believe it's a serial killer with access to secret passageways. One conspiracy theorist suggested that the hotel was built over a fault in reality, a thin place where the fabric between worlds wore thin. The hotel was eventually shut down and condemned, but urban explorers still sneak in, hoping to see something or someone. None have gone missing, yet. But they often return with stories of hearing voices behind the walls, of lights flickering in empty rooms, and once, a mirror that didn't reflect their friend beside them. Even now, the building stands, silent and watching. 74. The child who predicted her death. In 1993, a 7-year-old girl in rural Oregon began telling her parents about a woman she saw in her dreams. The woman wore black, had no eyes, and always stood at the foot of her bed, whispering her name. Her parents thought it was a phase, a vivid imagination. But the girl insisted it wasn't a dream. She said the woman had told her she would die soon. Her drawings became darker. Once bright and cheerful, they now showed twisted trees, figures in shadow, and graves. In school, she became withdrawn, often staring out the window, seemingly waiting. Then, one morning in October, she refused to go to school. She told her parents she wouldn't come back. Her mother, shaken, kept her home. That afternoon, while playing outside, a large oak tree, dead and brittle from rot, snapped in a gust of wind and fell. She was crushed instantly. The tree hadn't been marked for removal. No one had known it was so fragile. Her family was devastated. When they cleaned her room, they found a final drawing, a stick figure lying beneath a fallen tree, and the eyeless woman standing nearby, smiling. Was it a coincidence? A subconscious premonition? Or had something truly spoken to her in the dark? Some believe children are more open to things adults can't see. That the boundaries are thinner when we're young. Whether it was a sixth sense, a tragic accident, or something else entirely, one thing remains clear: she knew. And that knowing is what haunts people the most. 75. The stranger who knew my schedule. In 2018, a college student in Michigan began receiving strange texts from an unknown number. At first, it was simple: good luck on your exam, or hope your presentation goes well. Harmless, maybe even encouraging. She assumed it was a friend playing a prank. But the messages became more specific. Wear the red sweater today. It brings out your eyes. Or, don't forget to refill your inhaler before class. You left it on the kitchen counter. She started asking around, but no one admitted to sending them. She changed her number. The text still came. She stopped sharing her schedule online. The messages continued, always accurate, always one step ahead. Then came the photo. It was of her, asleep in bed. Taken from inside her apartment. She called the police. They searched her apartment, installed surveillance, and told her not to stay there alone. The investigation uncovered something chilling: a small crawlspace behind her bathroom mirror that connected to the next unit, one that had been recently vacated. Inside the crawlspace, they found food wrappers, a sleeping bag, and a phone. Whoever had been living there had been watching her day and night, learning her habits, studying her life. She moved out immediately, and the text stopped. The man was never found. The idea of being watched is terrifying. But being watched by someone who knows you better than you know yourself? That turns a creepy story into a waking nightmare. And worst of all, you might never know how long they've been there.